Well, Cesar was a pioneer. He's called, to me, he planted the seed. Others water it, and it grows. There's others, but Cesar planted the seed. Some of those farm workers working in the field with Cesar, some of them became congressmen, like Esteban Torres, who was the ambassador of Hispanic Affairs for Jimmy Carter, who believed in him. Other people, they became leaders, state legislature in California, city councilmen. But Cesar was the one who planted the seed.
Cesar Chavez was born near Yuma, Arizona in 1927. He lived on his family's farm until the Great Depression struck. That is when they became migrant workers because his parents were also migrant workers. He moved around a lot during that time. Cesar attended nearly 30 schools. At the schools that he attended as a child, they didn't allow Spanish speaking. Cesar found that very hard because at home, they only spoke Spanish. After he finished middle school, Cesar quit school and worked on the plantation. Working on the plantation was hard because many of the workers didn't have enough money to rent their own house near the plantation. They either slept in their cars or slept in the shack provided for them on the plantation. At the age of 17, Cesar joined the U.S. Navy and fought in World War II. At that time, the Navy was segregated. When he returned home, he married Helen Fabella, and for their honeymoon, they toured all the missions in California. At the time, Cesar was influenced by the community service organizer Fred Ross.
Cesar Chavez is a man who decided he was going to fight for everyone that had injustice in their life, specifically for people who were working in conditions that were so unjust and inhumane. People were getting paid pennies to do back-breaking labor out in the sun and the heat, and so they had no other choice. They didn't have education. They didn't have the things to get out of that lifestyle. And so he said it's not right for people to be picking and the crop dusters to be dropping the pesticides on top of them. He said there need to be better working conditions for everyday people. This is injustice. And so he wanted them to get better wages under normal conditions because they were human beings. And so he fought a fight against people that nobody else cared. That's why it matters so much, because he stood up for people when no one else was talking.
Cesar wanted to make people more aware of the difficult conditions of farm workers based on his early experiences. In 1962, Cesar formed the National Farm Workers Association.
But how many hours a day did an adult work?
An adult worked like 12, because they got up real early, right? Yeah, an adult worked like 12 hours a day. From 5, they'd start 6 in the morning in the field to 6 at night.
He wanted fair wages and better living and working conditions for migrant workers.
Up there, and people didn't have running water. They didn't have inside toilets. They didn't have, some houses didn't have electricity back then. So it was. But for the people back then, they were happy just to have 4 walls and a roof.
Well, Cesar Chavez stood for equality, treating everybody the same. And in the justice system, when you think about the justice system and the symbol of the justice system, Lady Justice that wears a blindfold, she doesn't see anything but justice, the law, and the facts. Doesn't look at race, gender, political affiliation. And Cesar Chavez, what he fought for and stood for was treating everybody the same, all the workers the same, equal pay, equal treatment, better working conditions. And so I support it. I love his life mission, what he stood for, and what he lived for. And so I think that's what we're seeing here, the spirit of Cesar Chavez and equality. And everybody should support that.
He made people more aware of the United Farm Workers cause by starting nonviolent boycotts and strikes. The groups that backed Cesar were religious groups and church organizations that also supported nonviolence. Cesar Chavez called for a new international boycott of grapes, and millions honored the United Farm Workers. A poll estimated that 17 million citizens participated in the boycott. In 1968, Cesar Chavez went on a fast for 25 days to protest the growing of violence in the organization.
He wanted to work straight. And he said, no, no more. You have to take a break. And they make them, give them good housing. Well, not great housing, but at least, you didn't have to sleep outside or under the truck.
When we think about the closing the income inequality gap that today is the largest it's been since the 1920s, we think about the work of Cesar Chavez. And when we think about all of the incredible things that we have to do to make sure that future generations of Americans have the same opportunities that we have today, we say a big thank you when we think about Cesar Chavez. So I want to say to you that even though Cesar's been gone now for 22 years, he passed away in 1993, his spirit also lives on, and the things that he fought for live on, and they continue in this city and throughout our country.
The strikes, boycotts, and negative publicity pressured the corporate grape growers to finally recognize the United Farm Workers Association and accept union contracts. With that recognition came changes to the working conditions Cesar fought so hard to obtain.
Under a roof made out of tin, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, hot. Then the deputies came and brought those chains. And the priest said to Cesar Chavez, "We're not criminals, Cesar. Those chains are not for us." And Cesar responded to the priest, "Yes, Father, they are for us. And we're not criminals." So they put him in chains and arrested them. That was his first arrest. Marching for justice for the forgotten people, the poorest of the poor, farm workers. All they wanted was clean water, a decent place to sleep.
A few months later, the United Farm Workers made history again by winning legislation which outlawed the short-handled hoe and the passage of the Agricultural Labor Relation Act in 1975. But Cesar's work wasn't over. He went on another fast in 1988 that lasted 36 days to protest the pesticides that were being dropped in the fields that was causing poisoning of grape workers and their children. In the 1990s, Cesar helped the United Farm Workers attorneys defend the union in a lawsuit by Bruce Church Incorporated against Salinas, a California-based lettuce and vegetable producer. Church demanded farm workers pay millions of dollars in damages from the United Farm Workers boycott on lettuce. On April 23, 1993, Cesar Chavez sadly and unexpectedly died in his sleep. More than 40,000 people marched behind a plain pine casket at his funeral, honoring a man who dedicated his life for the well-being of others.
All settled now.